Hi, I'm Chris Grimm, founder, coach, principal consultant of RA Consulting. For 24 years, we've been serving leaders and their teams around the world. This podcast, which I wanted to call The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, but it's called And Then I, is nothing scripted, nothing fancy. I promise that we'll be talking about successes and failures. It's the gold, I call it, that you find only in real stories with real leaders in real time. With that, I invite you to sit back, soak up the wisdom here of these everyday superheroes. Enjoy. Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's Chris Grimm, and I'm super excited about this episode. I know I'm always super excited, but this one is a little special because I have not a CEO who I worked with before, but instead an amazing leadership coach, a former professional athlete. You know what? I'm going to shut up because actually him telling his story is 1,000 times more interesting than me. So I'm not going to waste a lot of your time. I'm just going to say I hope you have a pad and paper because there's going to be a lot to think about and learn from this awesome human, Marc Stcherbina. So hi, Marc, live from Austin.
Chris, hello. Thank you for that intro. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited. I'm flattered. I'm honored. So I'm really excited to chat with you, as I always am. We always come up with some golden nuggets, don't we?
Well, it's completely true. And what is a little different for our viewers, listeners, like I said, oftentimes you all are watching or listening to me speak to someone who I know really well, like Sean Littman, who introduced the two of us, or a host of other leaders that I've worked with where I know their dirty laundry. So when they start telling, I can hold them accountable to that. This is a little different and actually a little bit more fun because I don't know all the details. We've only known each other for about a year, Marc and I, and contextually, everybody, Marc's going to tell you his story and you'll quickly figure out that I'm trying to help him find his way as a leadership coach. He doesn't need a lot of help, by the way. But this is different because of that. So let's jump in a little bit. I'm going to let you, start where you want to start. How about that?
I was born in 1970. Wait, how long do we have? Maybe you should tell me that first. Look, I'll give you the cliff notes because we want to get to right here and now, I'm imagining. Born and raised in Australia, hence the funny accent. I started playing rugby union. Well, I'll spare you those details, but rugby's a big sport in Australia. Played as a kid and turned professional when I was 20 years of age. I played for 12 years professionally, and that took me overseas. I played in Europe, France, England, ended up in Wales, where my career ended somewhat prematurely. I'm sure we'll dive into that. You won't let me not, Chris, with a broken neck. So a career-ending injury, a life-defining moment, still is to this day, and it guides me. And that was in 2009, where I retired from rugby, and then I've been on a personal growth journey ever since. Moved to LA shortly after, during my neck injury recovery, and spent 11 years in LA before moving here to Austin, Texas in October of 2020. I think we all know what went down in 2020. We all have our own version of that, and mine was I was done with LA. At that particular time, I needed a change. Most of the world had gone remote. So it allowed me to move here and continue my leadership coaching practice, which we will dive into, I'm sure.
Yeah. I have so many questions already. Like, first of all, because I'm not from Australia, and I also am not from anywhere where rugby was a thing, is 20 normally when people become a professional? Like, can we just go there for a second? Like, go on a path to be a professional? Because, here, contextually, if the person listening or watching is like me, an American, we only can compare it to like American football or maybe basketball or baseball. But do you know what I'm saying? Like, to me, becoming a professional athlete, there's a trajectory to that. And
yes.
Yeah. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, really good question. And I often use American sports to explain it. I compare the parallels and the incomparables. Age-wise, 20, to answer your question, is quite normal. It's on the younger side. However, normally turning professional around early 20s is the norm. It's possible around mid to late 20s, but normally you've been earmarked and you're good enough around that age to become professional. Where it's different to America is we don't have this college level that, what I understand, is mandatory. It's a mandatory step to become professional.
Right.
We don't have that. So that's where you'll often see someone, if they're good enough, come out of high school into club rugby, or they're already being put into an academy system for a professional team. If they're not quite yet ready to turn professional, they'll go into that step. So there's no college rugby that is you need to play here, and for most sports for that matter in Australia. But there are these age grade levels. So I represented Australia, for example, in the under-19s, and then I represented Australia in the under-21s. So I'm with a bunch of 19 to 20-year-olds representing our country that are not yet good enough to play in the full men's national team or a professional. Some players were playing professionally, but they were the really good ones. So then you would expect, once you've passed that under-21 level, you're now into the pro ranks. You're a young man, but you're expected to be able to handle playing against men. The open level. That's right. It. Free fall.
Gigantic men.
Oh, I mean, yeah, there's one thing to play with gigantic men in Australia, but then you play against gigantic men when you play New Zealand and South Africa. I think back and I don't know how I ever did it. I'm glad I still don't do it. But you just do it. And that was... So I was playing at men's club level, not yet professional, but club level at 18. So I got a taste already as an 18-year-old what it's like to play against fully grown men. And some of these guys were playing for the national team. Starting to get confusing, but that's...
No, I think it's actually the train of thought for me and for our listeners and viewers who often come to ARIA and then I for leadership development, right? To me, it's interesting, Marc, because I'm like, oh yeah, so your coaches kind of were your dad-ish. Do you know what I'm saying? Like your development as a young man. Yeah, it's a great part of the story. But as I'm thinking, as someone who coaches people all the time, and for a lot of time, it was mostly men in the last 27 years, right? Yeah, that's an interesting part of your story to me, because I'm like, oh yeah, you were surrounded by men who were helping develop your character, but also your skill, your like what it takes to be professional. Because again, I don't know what's real, but in my mind, there are high standards, I would assume.
Yeah. Straight into it, aren't we? That's a really good point. And you've heard me say it when I've talked about who my mentors were, who my father figures were. Yes, I have my own father, but as you said, we are often shaped by other prominent figures, leadership figures. Reflecting back now, they weren't always beneficial in certain ways. What I mean by that is because of the environment, it's not always a healthy masculine environment. This is a contact sport dominated by men. And especially back in the day, there was no professional women's sports. It was mainly men, and it was men coaching men. It was men commentating on men's rugby. It was men. And when you're in the locker room, you have certain codes that you abide by. You have other influences. You have captains of your team, and you're in that environment and you're being shaped by that environment. And like I said before, it's not always for the healthiest and to serve what would now become my profession, my career. So I've had to rewrite some of the programming. Yes, there's a lot, to your point, that you allude to in leadership that has served me and continues to serve me. When we talk about character, when we talk about winning mindset, resilience, all these things that were required to perform at the highest level of professional rugby stay with me today. And in fact, that is the reason why essentially I was brought into the corporate coaching landscape, because there is a demand for corporations to bring in former athletes, former military, to impart some of the knowledge, experience, and learning lessons on how to build a winning team.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I want to make sure we come back to your story, but you just said something important. As someone who's not been a professional athlete, but has spent a lot of time trying to shift people's mindset to a winning mindset. If you've never been on a great team and I've met these people, and I'm sure you are meeting them now that you're in other environments outside of sports. If someone contextually has never experienced in a sustainable way what it takes to be on a winning team, but to actually win on purpose, not just once, not just maybe twice, but that is a mindset. And so I want to make sure we talk about it more, but like I said, I want to come back to your story because I think it actually comes back to this anyway. But I don't think anybody should take this for granted, that it is actually harder to do if you've never experienced it in a tangible way.
Harder to do, you mean to win, to adopt a winning mindset?
Yeah, if you've never been on a team before, first of all, you've never been on a team before. Put a pin in that, because I have actually coached people who, they played tennis, they played golf, or they'd never played a sport. They were in band, whatever. It doesn't matter what they did in their years. If they had never played a team sport, then you put them in a work environment where they're now expected to be in a high performing team. They don't have any folders to access, right? There's no muscle memory for that.
True.
Right. And there's a lot of people like that. And you and I have talked about, even, like you said, even in this country, women's sports, for instance, not the same as men's sports. It's getting there. It's changing. In some sports, it's actually better. Awesome. But so for a lot of years, even using sports analogies in some ways was not including people, because there were people at the table who had never played sports or had no commensurate way of talking. Like there wasn't an equal way to talk about it with each other. So I do think it's not only important, it's part of the treasure that you bring, that might be, you might take it for granted, but other people will probably sometimes need it more than you realize.
Yeah. And listen, you make a really good point. Yes, I played professionally for 12 years. That was just professionally. I had a rugby ball in my hand at the age of 3.
Right.
I played Little League at the age of 5, against the older kids. So I was surrounded by, perhaps it's a cultural thing as well. We love our sports in Australia, and I played multiple sports. So I was always around it. And I think that's important to note, that I was already developing that mindset, abilities, if you will, to be able to play team and to be a team player, and what that looks like, even at a young age. Well,
it's cultural referencing, right? So let's come back in, because I'm super interested in how you get to this story. We started talking about this the other day, everybody, full transparency. And I was like, no, stop, wait, keep it for the podcast. Okay, so let's get to professional, and then I really want to talk about what you thought was going to happen and then what actually happened.
Oh, okay. On that fateful day.
Yeah.
Oh. So playing for a Welsh team, we're playing an away game against the best French team / European team, just to set the tone, right? I want you to be there with me, people.
Yep. Yep.
And we're playing against a team called Toulouse. They are heavily favoured against us, especially at their home ground. And we're going to use the underdog tag. So really excited, especially our performance leading up to that. We had a slight chance, but we knew we could give them a run. 48 hours before kickoff. So we arrive a few days before just to acclimatise in Toulouse. I come down with this stomach bug or something, which something I ate, something I caught that had me basically lose most of my fluids and whatever I'd put into my body. Sorry, can we beep this or no? I'll just say it was coming out of both ends.
Yeah.
And yeah, gross. And it was looking bad. 24 hours before the match, so the morning before the match, the day before, my team doctor, D. Clark, was monitoring me. It wasn't looking, I'd lost 10 pounds.
Wow.
And so that was dangerous in itself, that I'd lost that water weight and also was dehydrated, didn't have a lot of energy. And I needed to show signs of improvement rapidly, but it got to a point where she says, you haven't improved enough for my liking. I don't have a say. I can just give a recommendation to you and the coach that it's too close to the game and you haven't made the improvement we need to see. You're not ready to play. And it's dangerous for you to play. But it's your call. And of course, me being the stoic, the leader, I wasn't captain. I might have been vice captain for that game, but I was definitely, I had a leadership role with this club, with this team. Yada, yada, yada. My team, depends on me. We've got a slight chance. I'm not going to give this one up. It's been too much of a build-up. I'll be okay. The morning before the game, I was able to eat a piece of toast and keep it down. And that was my see, I can do it. This is at 10 a.m. I should be fine by 3 p.m. kickoff. Just Gatorade, fluids, let's just throw it into me. Let's get by on adrenaline, and then we'll figure out after the match how to recover, right? So she's like, okay, my thoughts. The coach was like, whatever you want to do, Mark, that's great. Are you sure? Now, he wasn't irresponsible. It was essentially my call, or so they said. So I took the field. And yes, I was running on adrenaline. I was underweight. I was lethargic, but adrenaline got me through to the first half and I was still okay. They were going to bring me off. I said, just give us as many minutes as you can. So go all out. And if you run out of gas, we'll bring your replacement on. If we get a half out of you, that's great. I've gone back. I said, I can go give you another 10 to 15 minutes in the second half. We were losing 7 points to 0, which means the game's close. So again, I'm like, had we been getting absolutely thumped, I would have been like, all right, there's nothing I can do here, or it's fruitless. So bring on the young kid, give him a chance. But I said, just give me 10 to 15. So 7 minutes into the second half, I broke my neck, where 3 players, I was trying to tackle one of their players, fell awkwardly. He fell on top, but it was 2 of my players that came across to tackle him at the same time. They all landed on my head and I was in a seated position. And there we go.
You have to move a little bit.
This is so you can be there with me. So
yeah,
that was shortly after I had a pile of bodies on top of me, felt something painful in my neck, but nothing else. I didn't know what was going on. I thought my shoulder was injured, but I couldn't move. And then once they all disappeared and I was still lying there, my team doctor ran on and the referee called the game because I was motionless. That's what they do automatically. And I remember she was...
Because you were motionless? Is that what you said?
I was motionless.
So
Yeah.
were you unconscious or you
No.
were conscious? You were
Fully conscious. So that's where I remember vaguely, like, again, it's adrenaline, Chris. So it's like, okay, just the play's gone, get up and follow. And I couldn't, but I could move. At least I felt like I could move slightly, but not enough to get to my feet. And then just found myself completely unable to move. And my team doctor with me, clutching at my shoulder, like, what's going on? You know, is it shoulder? Is it? And I said, I don't know. I think it's my shoulder. I don't know. I think my neck hurts. So she told me this. I didn't know that. She grabbed my hand to feel what my sensory feeling was like. And she said, does this hurt? And I said, does what hurt? She was squeezing my hand really tight. And at that moment, that's when she called over to the sideline. Yeah. To get the medics on immediately. And that's what you see unfolding here. 7 medical staff stabilizing my neck. I had oxygen on because once I realized it was a neck injury, I started to go into shock and go into panic. So I needed oxygen. And I guess this is an important part of the story, what was going through my head at this time. So I'm completely paralyzed. They have to gently get me onto a stretcher it took them 15 minutes to do so that they wouldn't compromise the neck. So in that moment or moments, a lot's going through my head, as you can imagine. There's confusion, there's realization, there's even some acceptance there of like, all right. And I liken this to those cartoons where all the voices in my head are like the little angel on one shoulder, little devil on the other shoulder. So the angel's saying, we don't know what it is. It's going to be okay. You could be completely fine. And you know what? Even if it is a neck injury, you'll maybe, you can compete in the Paralympics if you're paralyzed. This is going on positive.
15 minutes. Right.
And then the devil is like, oh no, this is bad. Your life's over. This is the end as you know it. What's the point? And then panic. It's okay. Panic. And it was that. Was
the devil telling you were going to die, or the devil was just telling you your career was over?
Career, life as I know it, identity. And I know we're going to talk about that. Identity as like what? And it's imagining like, if I can't use my arms and legs, what am I going to do? Who am I? How? Yeah. Can I exist when I've now imagine I'm not going into depth at this moment, but there are flashes and thoughts of it's more the emotion that came with it, the panic with the calm and the panic with the calm. And then for the next 10 minutes in the changing room, I'm still lying on the stretcher without feeling. And it's really sinking into me now. We're waiting for the ambulance to arrive. And those thoughts are becoming more prominent. And I'm really starting to map out and plan out. And I think it was more for self-preservation. I think I was, as I had done most of my career, training myself to not panic, to see opportunity, to not let my emotions get the better of me in that moment, to just calm me down. And when they were transferring me from the stretcher to the ambulance trolley to put me on the car, they unstrapped my ankle straps and it whipped my toe and I flinched. Like I felt it. And Chris, I got to tell you, because I'd been really thinking about things, even in that 10 minutes or 25 minutes, the outcomes and possible outcomes. Right then and there, I knew I couldn't, not only am I not a paraplegic because it's my feeling in my toe or a quadriplegic, I can't even be a paraplegic because there's no paraplegics that have no use of their arms but use of their legs. Right. And that was, to this day, the biggest relief I've ever experienced. That moment. And it's almost like the worry washed away. I kicked into some other mode at that stage where it's like, that's all I needed. Right. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. Right. I could just move my foot. That's it. I don't know, but That's it. That's the sign. I had surgery that night. I walked out of hospital 5 days. I walked out of hospital 5 days later, and I've made a full recovery.
Yeah. Mm. There's so much. And I've heard this story before, everybody. And every time I'm like, I don't know how you did that. But can we just back up for a minute? I want to ask you a question. If the accident wouldn't have happened, what did you think your life was going to be? Like, which version are we not living right now?
Oh, I think this is where what you've also heard me say before, in that it's the best thing that's ever happened to me, comes into play. Because I didn't know. I was already 31 years of age. I woke up, by the way, in hospital on my birthday. I turned 32 the day after I broke my neck.
Wow.
And that was a pretty decent present, right? A new neck.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know that.
32. So in my mind, like, I knew I was coming to the end. Oh, do you want the craziest part of the story, which does play into this, by the way? Because I was approaching I was in the twilight of my career. There was
32 years old.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's actually, for the position that I play, imagine a running back playing at 32, right? Or a wide receiver. I don't know if there's too many of them that still have a couple of years. And I felt I had 2 to 3 years left in me at that level. But I knew it was coming to an end, and I was prone to career-ending injuries, right? If I did a knee, if I did a shoulder again or whatever. And there was a company, a new insurance company for career-ending insurance and income protection insurance. There was a new company doing the rounds of all the clubs, trying to drum up business. But their point of difference with all the other insurance companies was that we don't have pre-existing injury clauses. So if you have had a bung knee for a few years and you do it again and it ends your career, we'll protect you. We'll pay you out. So as you can imagine, like, all these people were jumping on board. Didn't end up being the smartest business plan for them. But on the Wednesday leading up to that game, they visited my club. There were a bunch of us older fellas that got together. What do you reckon? Are you signing? Yeah, it sounds pretty good. I mean, we're not getting any younger. And like, yeah, I'm just not sure. And this is my personality. So I expressed interest, and they were like, oh, we've got him here. I said, yeah, but I didn't commit. And they said, well, we'll be back tomorrow. All right. So they came back the next day. That was Tuesday. Came back on Wednesday. Hey, Mark. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. They want a decision from me. It's lunchtime. I'm about to go and practice. I can't be late for practice. And they're like, so you made a decision? I'm like, yeah, I have a few questions. Look, I've got to go to train. I said, why don't you just sign now so that you're protected, and you have 2 weeks, like a cooling off period. If you change your mind, you can go home, you can think about it, but you're protected for the weekend. Fine, signed. All right, how much do you want to protect yourself for? And I'm like, to do the math, because the more you protect yourself for, the more of your salary percentage, the higher the premium. So I'm like, and they said, well, look, you've got 2 weeks to decide on that as well. So just put the full amount of your contract. Fine. Signed officially. And I'm going to go home and think about it and maybe pull out of it if I don't think it's worth it. Because I've had injury insurance before that's never amounted to anything, never needed it.
Right.
That was Wednesday, broke my neck on Saturday.
I'm on the edge of my seat because I don't know this. Go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the first things I thought about when I woke up with a full body brace in hospital with my new neck was, is that injury policy still good? That's all I could think about, because I'm obviously thinking, this is the end of my career.
Right.
What am I going to do And I tell you what's going to help is if that injury insurance kicks in, which it did. Not only was it like, because I was thinking, oh, they're going to find a way to null and void. It's too close to when I signed or whatever. I was panicking in my hospital bed. And they not only did they honor it and protect me, they considered me now the poster child for their business. They're like, see, Marc Stcherbina, it could happen to you too. And thankfully, he signed the week before this happened. So that was going to cover me for 3 years, 50% of the salary that I nominated, tax-free, a buffer. It gave a buffer. So I didn't have what I think a lot of athletes have at the end of their career is the money concerns of like, not only what am I going to do for my purpose, but what am I going to do for money? And how am I going to earn the same or anywhere near the same kind of money I'm earning as a professional athlete if I go in and start being a real estate agent at entry level with a bunch of college kids that have just come out of college and we're all earning minimum wage, which I know for a lot of athletes, having worked with a lot of them, is a concern. So I'm not saying I didn't completely have that concern. Yeah.
Because you said you had no plan, like you didn't have a retirement plan. What do rugby players do when they're 32 or 34 or 35 and they stop playing rugby? Because I don't know if it's the same as here. I know what some of those stories are.
Right. You know, a lot of them, okay, so when I was living in Wales, a lot of them, particularly in smaller cities, tend to leverage their profile and go into professions like property development. Some of them start cafes.
Right, because the fans still. Oh yeah, right. I have experienced that.
Right.
Car dealerships, John Elway. Got it.
And John Elway can do whatever he wants and probably live anywhere in America, and he'll be known. Not necessarily the case with professional players that are known within that town. So if they go outside of that town, it's like, well, I'm just like I did. I moved to LA. No one's going to know me in LA. But I did have an option. I was offered a job to coach the team that I was playing for, so a professional contract to continue on with rugby, but as a coach. Secure, still relevant, living in the same town, I'm known, and it would provide me that certainty and security that I wouldn't get from doing something completely new in a completely new city. However, because of the luxury, and I'd saved some money over my career, so that with that and the insurance money, it gave me the platform to say, I don't want to do that. I actually would like a break from rugby and go and figure out who I am, because something inside me is not leading me to continue in this industry, in this sport, which we can talk more about, Chris, because it's on reflection. I figured out a lot about myself, that rugby, I was good at it. It wasn't necessarily my absolute passion. I loved playing it as a game as a kid, but it was completely different professionally. And I actually had other interests that I would have loved to have pursued, but rugby just came easier to me and potentially made more money for me. So that was always living inside me when I was playing rugby, that conflict inside me of like, is this really what I want to do? I'm bashing my body every day, but it's giving me recognition. It's giving me validation. It's making me feel like a real man, which is also important in society, which is a whole other conversation that I'm having with people, that's not the healthiest way to think. But something deep down was like, there's something else for you that you're not exploring and honoring. So let's explore it. You have some money, you have time. And what we haven't touched on, Chris, is that profound sensation during that whole neck injury incident is that I felt I'd been given a second chance at life.
That's a big deal.
It's a big deal because that helped me make the unpopular choice, the scary choice of turning my back on rugby that was offering me security. Should I stay in the UK? It's like, you can still be the man. We're going to pay you well. You've got your business contacts you've built for 5 years. You've got your friends. You're going to be okay if you stay here, security-wise. But I'm like, yeah, but it rains nearly every day. And this is the easy thing to do. I feel called to do the challenging thing. I feel called to explore what it is that's churning in my stomach. That's like, perhaps this isn't who you are. So the first thing I decided to do was, well, go live somewhere that's sunny because you love the sun. And when you wake up every day, you're going to have a smile on your face. That's a good start to each day. And I visited LA a bunch, and it's the best climate I've ever experienced. So I'm like, well, let's try that. Whereas people do it the other way around a lot of the time, don't they? It's like, let's make sure I have a job somewhere before I move there. I was like, let's move there, know that the weather's going to make me happy and the energy of the place, and then figure it out.
Yeah.
From there.
I think what you just touched on is important for anybody listening or watching. You know, Mark and I have spent a lot of time talking about, you know, the interesting reality that most people, whether it's inside their job or, I mean, everybody's having it right now inside their jobs. I feel like some level of change is being required. For some people, that's known and right in front of them. And whether they're leading the change or they're being affected by change, being led by something else, it's real. And in our personal lives, we also experience change all the time. Some people seem to be better at it than others, but what's fascinating is, and I want to put in some terms here because you and I talk about it, but I don't know that these are normal terms for people until they are, which is, you know, you experienced a forced ego death, right? Like your whole identity was instantaneously in question.
Yeah.
And most people don't experience that, right, without crises like we're talking about, right? So you are the living embodiment of someone who experienced the full stop by the universe change.
Yeah.
But yet you and I, now that you're a coach, right, and we're spending time with people, we're always trying to help people make change, hopefully before the crises, right? Before you get fired, before something external creates the ego death for you. And it's really hard to do that, everybody.
Very hard.
Right? Because our ego is we're living our life in a comfort zone, each one of us all the time, right? Like that's what we do, even if we don't like it. And so the universe sometimes has to come and whack us.
Back to your question, what would you have done had you not broken your neck?
Right.
I was heading down that same road of just being the frog in the very slowly boiling water, choosing comfort. I might have just chosen comfort. That's why I outlined like the options available to me. And had I finished my career on my terms, had another couple of years started to make a plan, I would have maybe based it on security, comfort, image. But it was this crisis that you talk about that was like second chance at life. That means commitment to make the most of it. That means, how have you been showing up? How have you been living? What choices have you been making? Is that living life to the fullest that now you're saying to yourself you want to do? Make sure you do, because you've had it nearly taken away from you. And who am I to whatever power? I was not remotely religious or even spiritual before that moment, but I had this profound sense that something, some force, much greater than me, had a plan for me, and it wasn't to be done yet. So that's where the leadership comes in as well, because I didn't just feel like you've been granted another chance to live a great, fun, pleasurable life. And are you really doing it? It's to get out there and do some work and make a change. Whether it's in other individuals' lives or on a larger scale. We've got a job for you, is how it felt to me that whole moment.
It feels like that now, right? You said, I mean, I heard you say this, and, you know, some people say these things and I don't know that they always completely believe it. I believe you believe this, that was the best thing that happened to you.
Because it woke me up. Yeah. And just as you were saying before, it's so many of us are asleep.
Everybody.
In some way.
It's easy to, even if you hate your job, right? Even if you hate your spouse, I don't know, I hear stories from people all day, every day. And I'm always like, how did we get like this? It's really, really easy to be complacent and comfortable and not try to be, you know, at your best. And I have another question to you. I think it'll come right back here, but I don't know if you note this, everybody, just transparency. We were at South by Southwest a few weeks ago together and had the chance to serve together for a nonprofit. And afterwards, I told Marc basically like, okay, you're like extraordinary. And the reason I said that is because, one, it's true. And two, because what I experienced was that I don't think you do anything half. Like, it doesn't feel like you do anything halfway. And that doesn't feel normal to me. So I guess that's really an insult for a whole bunch of other people. But I noticed that about you. And of course, then it brought me more curious questions as a woman who coaches a lot of men, right? For a long time, as I was like, has he always been this guy? Like, did being a professional athlete bring that out in you? Or did your experience bring that out in you? Like, are you more excellent today post the accident?
Excellent. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that description. Thank you, Chris. And again, the opportunity to serve was wonderful. But that's part of also this new commitment is being in service, being of service, and just knowing. So it's a combination, I think, right? I'm able to apply. How can I answer this? Since that incident, yes, I'm more connected to what it means to show up fully. And how important that is to me, because in my mind, I'm also connected to how finite and unpredictable our life is and when we're going to leave this form. Back to your point of how difficult it is for people to imagine that, therefore they keep on the same mediocre path, if we're going to talk about excellence versus mediocre.
Yeah.
So showing up fully, showing up, being present, committing, it's been a practice. And combining the skills of being a professional athlete, the discipline is probably the key here. The discipline that was required to develop the skills, develop the fitness, develop the mindset, do it day in, day in, day out, put yourself through physical pain. I can then apply that to the discipline required to show up fully, to put myself in uncomfortable situations, to break through the image conversations that I have if I want to relax or be comfortable or was doing it last night, right? People are walking by. We're there to raise money for a good cause and sell tickets. The comfortable thing would be to just stand back and wait for people to come to me. If they see that I'm selling tickets, they'll know, they'll come to me. And if they don't, well, I don't want to bother them. Why do I not want to bother them? Well, the image and the feeling that conjures up, what if I make them uncomfortable, or they say, no, we're fine. We're just here to, we don't like that discomfort. I push through it anyway, because that's my image. And what's more important, and this is a practice, this is the discipline, is just keep practicing, pushing through it and making the vision of what you're doing bigger than your own discomfort. Because then you get to see what's on the other side and how good it feels. Chris, it feels so damn good. So when I'm there looking like to you, like, wow, this guy doesn't, this is different. This is interesting. I don't see someone like apply themselves this way in these situations. Is this normal? Is he normal? That's through practicing, just doing it, not caring how I look, but experiencing how good it feels, the results that come as a result of doing that and showing up fully. And then I can get to the end of the day and ask myself, did I live fully? I can answer yes, because I want to be able to answer yes at the end of my life. Did I live fully? And the only way to get to that is if I can say that as many times as possible with every day that I'm lucky to have up to that moment. Because I don't know if I could confidently say that if I have more days where I answer that question, nah, don't think I gave it all today.
There's so many things that you just said. Everybody listening, watching, I told you to get pen and paper because we were going to cover a lot of important points here. And so I want to highlight, and maybe for those watching and listening, this is a question you need to ask yourself, right? Which is, how often do I lean into discomfort? Maybe that's just it, question mark. I also think some things that you're saying go to philosophically, Mark, what I was saying to you, that I run into a lot of people who have never been on a high performing team. They have not been in their life in a family environment or a work environment or a team environment where someone, a coach or their peers or a parent, right, taught them what excellent is. And so for people who don't know this, like, my coaching has been built off of, value-centered leadership, etc. I grew up with a dad who was a military officer, but also my parents both came from, they had me in high school. They worked through some pretty significant challenges at the beginning of our family. And so our family values were, pretty high standards. And that was an overt conversation to the point where when I went to undergrad, I had to unlearn some things, Mark, because I thought, strangely, even through high school and then in college, but when I got to college and lived with a bunch of chicks in a dorm, I learned very quickly that other people don't have the same standards as we had in our house. And I had to unlearn, right? Because living with super high standards, being excellent all the time is not easy, because most people, they don't have a consistent experience that way, right? So I just want to unpack that a little bit, because as you were talking, I'm like, I think what happens sometimes is people might aspire to be excellent but maybe they don't. Or maybe they don't even know what that is. And so you come along or I come along and we start pushing. And we're almost like pushing on nothing. Does that make sense? Like we're literally trying. That's like you explaining rugby to me. I didn't even know what a scrum was. Like, you know what I'm saying? Before Sean Lippman told me, like, it's a language I don't speak, so I can't feel it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. I just think it's real. And when I look on Instagram, or I don't know about you, but when I see what other coaches are doing, I think we all are tending to do the same thing. Like we're trying to talk people into being excellent, trying to be something. And one of the reasons why everybody's not doing it is because they don't have the ability to just conjure it in their mind randomly. I don't know.
No, you do know. You're spot on. And as you're saying all that, Chris, I'm thinking, actually, something you said is like people don't know necessarily what it is. So then the next question, naturally, as a coach and as coaches would be, well, how would you teach someone? How would you get buy-in from them that that's a good way to be, first and foremost? And then, okay, now that I know it's a good way to be, how do I change the habits that are required, right? Which is what you were talking about. You, from a young age, developed those habits because you were surrounded by it. It was drilled into you.
It was yes, it was beat into me. Yes, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and you're right. There are going to be some people that are like, well, especially the way that excellence is presented to some people just goes over their head, because it's like, well, that's not my life. I don't need all that, high performance, high discipline. I just want to be I just want to be happy, man. I just want to go with the flow and all this regimented, to which I would say, well, that's not necessarily what it is either. So when coaching excellence, you need to keep in mind that it is a step, I believe, to happiness. What do I mean by that? And I think that's where you can get buy-in from everyone, is step back and ask the question, which I do always, what kind of life experience do you want? And I have that moment that I can just keep connecting to and share where I thought it was taken away from me for a moment. And then, just kidding, here's your legs, here's your arms, here's your life. What did you learn? What are you going to do differently now? How do you feel about it now? Well, I haven't got a moment to waste. I developed urgency because of that. So I don't procrastinate anywhere near as much now, because I've got a lot to do in this day, let alone this life. So that helped. And I keep connecting to that. Well, what kind of life experience do you want? Now we start to talk about happiness. So when people think, like, form your definition of happiness, I have an opinion on that. For me, it's fulfillment and pleasure. I think people mistake happy with just pleasure. Pleasure is dangerous in high doses. We've got the neurotransmitters to back that up. Dopamine in high levels are addictive. We become addicted. It's not good for our health. Too much pleasure. I think a lot of people can relate and have their own version of, when I chase pleasure all the time, I have gotten into trouble and it hasn't been good for my health, my relationships, whatever. So it's getting that definition of happiness secure. And then this is what self-awareness is all about, right? So what are my values? Because this is where fulfillment comes from. And I won't go through all the steps, but you see where I'm getting at here is stand back, start with that. What kind of life experience do I truly want? And am I doing what's necessary to achieve that? And excellence fits in there somewhere. And it is a good idea to add excellence in your list of values, because I firmly believe that in some way it is going to contribute and it is going to serve your desire for a happy, fulfilling, pleasurable life. Now, that's just the cliff notes.
I think that's really good advice. Again, for usability for the people listening and watching. I do think a moment where you can reflect on what Marc's saying is critically important, because if nothing else, guess we might have to just take that little spot out. I'll start over because I don't know what's happening here, but the dog's not barking.
I can't hear anything, if that helps.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. Second, no dog, no banging.
Okay, I'll come back in.
Come back in.
I think the exercise is important for everyone to, first of all, if they can't get to excellent, well, let's just pretend that you are listening or watching this and you're already starting to kind of turn it off, right? Because maybe, and I think in a post-pandemic world, we're at 2023 when we're recording this, and we're still, and I believe now in many businesses, just feeling the effects of the few years that we had a pandemic and the impact on businesses. Now the downstream effects are starting to happen on our economy, et cetera. So I know there are a lot of people who are not only unable at the moment to sometimes think about excellent, they're really getting triggered into survival mode. Like, is our economy going to have problems? There's banks collapsing. There's people being laid off of big companies that we thought were growing really fast. Uh-oh, do. And I'm saying this because I think, you have the luxury of re-listening to what Marc said as many times as you want. And I would urge you to do that, because even if things are uncertain, maybe that's good, right? Maybe that is the crisis before the crisis, right? Like we don't need everybody to almost break their neck or to break their neck. Like we can't require values change only based on crises, everybody. It's one of the reasons why so many people kind of feel like zombies, or often will say to me kind of like, I just feel blah. I'm not loving this anymore. I know I need to change. They're getting that little niggling, Marc, that you were talking about in you, that you're supposed to be doing something else, but most people don't know what to do about it. And so I do think the exercise that Marc's talking about is important, if not critical. Like, if not now, when? Like, do you want to wait until a crisis happens? You can. Marc will tell you.
I don't recommend it. I don't recommend it because it could go wrong. It could. You don't have to do it. That's the good news. Yeah. Well, and I think, I know we're running out of time, but I do think also, I just want to mention this because I think it's kind of your mission, Marc. I'm saying that, you guys, I don't know that, Marc, you're going to agree with me, but we've had some conversations about you wanting to create experiences for people to get as close to that ego death as possible. Very compelling. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that, but for anybody listening or watching, if you guys want to even give us feedback, you can do that in the comment section, or just email him or email me. You can find him at Winning EQ. You can find me at Aria, of course. But this dialogue feels important, right? Like, is there a way that we can create a not so shallow, because people are over trust falls, and Tony Robbins been doing fire walking for a long time. Like, all of those experiential things are kind of made to do the same thing, right? Like, to trigger your personal fear so that you make this big old leap. Yeah.
But people are kind of over that. Some of those things are like, they're cliche now.
Right. And as you're saying that, Chris, like, sometimes just doing it once in a 5-day intensive workshop that you pay a couple of $1,000s to attend isn't enough.
That's right.
So again, we come back to that constant practice. Now, a couple of things come to mind that I still, despite having had that, like I have the video, I've told you, of me breaking my neck. It was a TV game.
Oh.
And I have 7 different angles of me crushing my neck. If I'm having a bad day, or if I'm having an unmotivated day, or if I'm feeling sorry for myself for whatever reason, and I'm not in gratitude, I can easily just press play. And I do that. And I'm like, okay, I needed that. I'm still here. Remember your commitment. So let's go. Not everybody has that, as you said. But even though I have that, I also practice other things. Like I stumbled across this. It was on another podcast where the guest was talking about a new app he developed based on death meditation that the Bhutanese monks would practice to enhance their experience of happiness, to make them happier people. They they imagine their death or meditate on it 5 times a day. And that's the number, randomly, 5 times. They make sure that's their practice, that's their discipline. And by taking themselves to that moment, it helps them live more in the present moment, be grateful for it, and make the most of it. And the app is called We Croak, by the way. Hunter Bergwall, We Croak, right? And all it is, it's the simplest. I love this app, and I tell everybody to download it. And it just sends you a random notification every day, 5 times. It says, it'll come up on your phone. Don't forget, you're going to die.
Okay.
And yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So for some people, that's too much. For me, and then, I say, I get it if it is, but it's important. Maybe start there. Have a laugh at it, whatever, but be open to it, allow it in, and maybe even imagine it. Now, you'd be probably not surprised at how many times that notification has come up when I've been in a funk as well.
Bling.
And it's like, or I'm stewing over, my ego is going rampant, and I'm upset about something, I'm overanalyzing something someone said to me, and I'm trying to, don't forget you're going to die. Let it go. It's gone. You're right. Thank you. We croak. I am. That's one way, Chris. There's another way is, look, even there's a TED talk by Tim Urban on procrastination. And he flashed up this slide where he summed up your life in 52 squares.
I have it on my wall here, by the way.
You're kidding me. Okay. Right.
I have it right here. I'll just,
Well,
Gus, sorry. Gus, everybody is my production person, and Gus is assistant. Go. You're going to show the production lights. Sorry. Right there on my wall.
Do it. There it is.
I have my life in weeks.
See, life
every Sunday. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the idea that you live for approximately 4,000 weeks.
If you're lucky.
Your 80s, if you're lucky.
How do we even know?
My kids, by the way, everybody hate that. They think it's the most morbid thing ever. But I guess it was about 15 years ago. I don't actually know when I started doing that, but every Sunday I mark off another week.
Right.
Now, who knows? You're right. You don't know. So
you don't, but can I mention, and you kids, I am not surprised, because young people think they have, and they do, but their mindset is that they have death is way off in the future. And that is a trap also, but it's understandable.
Yeah.
The word morbid and not wanting to think about it is understandable.
Yeah. But
it's also important to change that relationship, because no one's getting out of here alive, people. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yes. The meat suit doesn't go with us.
Doesn't go. No. So yes, it's morbid. Yes, it's scary. That's probably what's underneath it's basically, I don't want to think about that. That's part of the problem.
But I think look, we're going to need to do a part 2, everybody, but let me just say, this is super important because people who have been following this podcast, but also when I was doing the podcast with Nick Vujicic, which was during pandemic. And it was Nick's. So anybody who wanted to look at that, that's a whole other thing, because Nick has no arms and legs and he's some kind of phenom, but another day. But we talked about this a lot because, of course, when the pandemic started, what was obvious to me coaching people, being on Zoom in this weird, what for some people felt apocalyptic, for other people felt like, no big deal. Like, it was the range of reactions was fascinating. A study in itself, of course. But the people who were triggered by that, maybe people around them actually got COVID and died, right? There were people who had what I'll call extreme experiences during that time. There were those of us who did not. Even though going home to work and being on Zoom in this format was a brand new idea and it felt odd, it did not feel life-threatening to me. And so processing with people, and I think it's related to this, Mark, because I think that at this moment in time, at least what I'm seeing in coaching, and I know my friends who are therapists are also experiencing some of this, is that post-pandemic, there are a lot of people who are not going back to their old thinking, but they don't have totally new thinking either. But there is this underlying, well, I think I might have told you one day, we met with the marketing firm that manages all of our courseware content, and they always bring us the SEO search terminology, the things that are here's the top 10 things people are searching on the internet this week. You don't always want to know. Anyway, but in our genre, right? For weeks, last year in 2022, the number one thing was existential crises.
Yeah. What does my life mean? Yeah.
I was like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Okay, I know what's happening. People want meaning. People don't want to go back to their comfort zone, even though they don't know how to get out of their comfort zone. So, like I said, I think we need a part 2 because we're just scratching the surface here. But I would say to anybody listening or watching that don't take this lightly. Like, there are awesome people out here. Mark is one of them, who are around to help you figure out where your entry point is into this conversation. Like, if you are fully ready for excellence, there are coaches, there are people out here who are ready to show you how to do that within the context of your current life, or if you want to shift your job or shift your life, there are people to help you do that. And there's more people now than we've ever had who are wanting to help. So you don't have to stay in a crappy job. You don't have to stay in a crappy relationship. You don't have to. And I think what Mark's saying is even more important, which is you should have maybe, I don't know what the term is, maybe it's self-worth, but maybe just want to have a happy life.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Can I just jump in, because I'm imagining, and that's probably where people get stuck, is because they feel they need to jump off into whatever this new life is immediately. And of course you're feeling stuck and scared and not knowing how to go about it. Start with what we've talked about, and what stay in your crappy job for now, fine, but start asking questions of yourself. Just start there. What kind of life do I want to experience? Build your self-awareness. Learn about yourself, get to know your strengths, get to know your tendencies, your potential liabilities. Look at your values. Who out there has even sat down and written down a list of, what are my values? What do I value? Because I know we get drilled into how much money do I want to make by the end of this year? Right? Surface level stuff. Because we haven't visited our values, we often go and chase those material goals out of alignment with our values, and we don't realize why we don't feel quite good about it because we haven't checked in with ourselves. So I just wanted to add that. You start there. You don't have to come up with the answer immediately. Just start there and build momentum. And with that, I'm sure will come some more clarity and some confidence to then step into that life experience that you've come up with yourself that you prefer to be living than what you are living now.
Okay, well, that was great. So, Marc, thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you to everybody listening and watching. Like I said a few times, you can rewind and re-listen to all the gold as much as you need, and you know where to find us. And if you don't, there's links in the comment section and everywhere this is posted, you will be able to find me. Oh, my voice is going, so it must be the end. You can find Marc at Winning EQ. He's got his own podcast. He's got his own amazing website and lots of awesome offerings. And of course, if you're here, you probably know Aria Consulting and where to find me. So with that, we're going to end this episode. And like I said, I think part 2 will be coming soon.
Please, I love our chats, Chris. Just selfishly, do it for me.
Done. Okay, everybody. Thank you.